Hey guys, welcome back to this amazing episode of Ask Me How I Know. I am so excited to be joined by two previous guests who I thoroughly enjoy as human beings, as investors, and just lights in this world. I'm welcoming back Jens and Lisa. And today, this is going to be a completely different Ask Me How I Know episode because we're going to be talking about the how to leave your W-2. I know a lot of people talk about, oh, this is, they'll say how to leave your W-2, and then they leave out actually the granular, the nitty gritty steps as to actually, this is what you need to do. And here are the steps that I took that allowed me this freedom. What's super unique about this episode is that we're speaking to, I don't think that there's a listener that we're not going to speak to in some capacity. We have genders covered. We have dual income. We have single income. So there's somebody like you're going to hear things that you will be able to apply to take those steps that you want to find that freedom that you were looking for financially. So that was like the longest introduction I think I've ever done with guests on the air. I am grateful to have you. Welcome, Jens and Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie.
So I'm going to point all of the awesome listeners back to the podcast episodes where I featured each of you individually. So if you want to hear more from Jens and Lisa, I'm just going to tell everyone up front right now, just go back to those podcast episodes. They'll be linked in the show notes. But today we're going to get into the how. Lisa, you've been out of your W-2, I think, for a month now?
Yeah, approaching a month. This week will be a month. Yes.
This Friday, right?
Yes, this Friday.
And Jens, how long have you been?
It's been like 5 weeks. So, I mean, we must have the same timeline here.
That's right. And you both left your W-2s in different capacities. So maybe we could start there. There are different ways. Jens, you didn't just sign away and resign. How did you go about that?
No, I actually, I had been thinking about it for a while that it was time to leave. I felt like I wanted a little bit of a soft landing, and I also felt like I owed that to my employer. So I came up with an arrangement with my company to do it was actually 8 months of going to part-time where I would, work 3 days a week. I would really train my replacement and give them an opportunity to step into my role. And that was in the IT. I've been in IT for most of my adult life. So train them, do a lot of knowledge transfer, and really prepare them for it because they weren't going to rehire my position. So that was a good opportunity there. So I felt like gave everybody that security and that comfortableness of me moving on, I guess.
That's it. Now, I mean, it's still relatively new, and if we circle back to this in a year, it'll probably the answer might shift a bit. But at this point, I mean, when you look back on how you left, do you think that was a good strategy to go about it?
I think so. I think it was a little bit too long because the last 3 months I'm like, oh God, can this be over, please? But but overall, I think it was a good strategy. It allowed me to slowly ramp up more on my real estate, my coaching side, and ramp down the W-2 work. So I liked it. It was probably the safer approach than other people may choose, but it worked for me.
Nice. Okay, I have to do a follow-up on that. Would you say 3 months? You went 8 months. So what would you condense it down to?
Yeah, I mean, 4 to 6 is something like that. It really depends what kind of job you're in, how they look at people leaving and so forth, right? Because some organizations are like, oh, you want to leave? Well, here's your box. Please be out by 5 o'clock, and that. So it depends on your organization and your relationship with your managers, I guess.
So true. And Lisa, when you left, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so for me, when I put in notice, I sort of knew I would need to give a little bit of a runway, not as much as Jens. So I gave notice in mid-March, and for my job, we're sort of in quarters. So I knew that if I went into the second quarter and past June 30, like it just wouldn't make sense, at least for me to leave, because I would have worked significantly most of the year. So I figured, if I was going to do it, I needed to push myself to do it in that mid-March time period. So that way I would give enough time to roll off. So that's essentially what happened when I gave notice in mid-March. Then we chatted a bit and I was like, okay, can you just stay through mid-April? So yeah, there was someone else who had left before I did in early January, and it took almost 2 months for them to hire his replacement because his replacement didn't start until the beginning of April. So, yeah, so I sort of knew it would take a little bit of time given what I saw from that experience. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Well, and one of the things that I'm gleaning from both of you is understanding the cycles and understanding the culture of where you work is really part of the process
Yeah.
of deciding when to leave and how to leave.
Absolutely.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Well, that was enough with the soft questions. We're going to get nitty and gritty because everybody wants to know, how did you map out leaving your W-2? I mean, did you just sit down with your spreadsheets and figure it out? You guys are both very detail oriented people. So, can you walk us through that process of, okay, I decided I'm leaving my W-2, but now how do I actually figure that out? What's the first step that you would recommend to people?
You want to take that, Lisa?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is getting clear on, there's two things. The first is like getting clear of your expenses and your financial situation. I think by getting clear on, what your burn rate is, like, so how much does it cost for you to live each month? That then sort of helps you to sort of see, okay, how much money do you have, like in savings? For me, it was not an overnight thing. Looking back, like I started this journey back in 2017. I wasn't like clear that I was going to leave, but I was clear that I wasn't going to stay in corporate America for the rest of my life. So I started to save and I started to make different decisions in terms of like where I chose to live, and like what I chose to do. And I could go into more granular detail, like everything from, like, the first thing was like where I chose to live. So I chose places that would enable me to still have the comfort of living that I needed to have, but then maximize the amount of savings. So I didn't live in like class A developments, even though I have had lived in those kind of developments in the past. But I chose to come out of those developments and find places that would enable me to pay less in rent. And for me, I felt like that was one of the benefits of not having bought something, is that I had the ability to then choose where I wanted to live. So that could decrease my rental expenses. The next thing is like even from like your HSA. So like when I signed up for like medical through my employer, I chose like a high deductible plan that came with a health savings account. So I was funding, but they also funded as well. So by doing that, like when I get to this point in my journey, 5 or 6 years later, I have a healthy HSA, and then I can also mix it with another plan that's outside that's similar to that. I think the other thing is, in addition to that, is thinking about a business that you can create. Businesses, like when I started thinking about businesses and creating businesses from 2017, that helped to decrease my tax bill that I was paying to the IRS, given that my income was so high. Like I paid a lot each year in taxes. Once I started introducing business expenses, like that really helped a lot in terms of getting some of that money back. So I'll stop there. There's more
Wait,
things, but I
there's
think
a
I'll stop there.
question.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of listeners will say, wait, hold on, Lisa, you created a business,
Yes.
so can you tell a little bit about that,
Sure.
and how that served you?
So 2017 was my first business. I was doing an accounting business for real estate investors. I learned a lot from that experience. Quickly realized that it wasn't really my forte. I then did another business and then finally ended up with the syndication business, which I started doing for about a year and a half up until the point at which I decided to leave. So this one is the most, in terms of expenses, this one generated the most. And I saw this significant impact to my taxes because of this one. Because, like, for me, like, I have like podcast expenses. If I would go to conferences, any mentorship and coaching, all of those mentorship and coaching programs, which were all supporting me developing in my business, were all tax write offs that I could take against my income and then ultimately decrease my AGI.
That is
So,
super
yeah.
powerful.
Yes. So that was
Awesome to have us. Awesome to have a CPA on there, with your background for the financials and kind of planning that out. That's super awesome.
And I think I completely gapped on mentioning that is that, yeah, Lisa her background is in CPA. Do you want to just give a brief, so there's a reference point on that?
Well, yeah. So my job was, I was an accountant. Like, I'm still an accountant. I did a controller role at an investment management firm working on private equity real estate funds. So definitely on a regular basis, we're running the budgets on these funds, like, in terms of like making sure that we call capital and like how much you can make a distribution on, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so that sort of helped a lot in terms of, I would say it definitely helped a lot in terms of like managing finances and burn rates and like looking at what your expenses are and like thinking about different things as well. One other thing I would say is I also invested passively in real estate syndications. It took me a while to get there, but once I found real estate syndications about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, and started investing, that helps because that, even though I did not want to rely on that income, so I wanted to make sure that I saved enough where I wouldn't need to rely on that. But having those, like, I've invested in 4 to date, they kick off cash flow each month, which is great. And when they sell, then I roll that money into another deal, which then also should anticipately kick off cash flow as well. So yeah.
That is awesome. And we're going to dig into that passive investing component for sure. I'm like, that is on the list. the episode where Julie actually has questions to ask. Jens, how about you? How did that process actually look?
Yeah, so I started about 5 years ago on the investing path, and I took a different approach. But I started buying small apartment complexes, the fourplexes and so forth, and with the goal of, hey, I want passive cash flow to at least sustain my lifestyle. And like Lisa, we figured out what our freedom number was in terms of what is our monthly expenses and so forth. I'm like, it won't be too hard to reach that number. But I also had like a 10-year plan because I was like, okay, I can buy so many units per year and save. And, so I was like, okay, but that was before I knew about syndication. This was about it before I knew about starting my own business or anything like that. Then when I started like thinking about, well, this is going to take a lot of capital to get there and it'll be very slow, I started learning like, well, I can actually start syndicating deals and start earning money both from acquisition fees and from, kind of a GP ownership in the deals and so forth. And I was like, wow, this is actually interesting. Now there's a different way. This still almost earned income to some degree because it's, that's money you make by closing a deal and so forth, but it can be significant. So if you can do 1 or 2 or 3 of those a year, that would even exceed my W-2 income from the IT world. So we started doing a few of those, in 2019, I think I did a couple, and there were small payouts. 2020, actually, the payouts started increasing. I got a bigger share of those deals. And then I also started refinancing and selling some of my earlier deals. It's like, wow, I actually have a lot of money in the bank now because of these kind of that snowball that's starting to grow very well. And then I also I was like, man, I got to start a business too. So I started coaching. So I'm a certified high performance coach. So I started coaching both that and also some real estate and new real estate investors. And I was like, wow, here's another way to make some income on the side. That's also, again, time for money, but it's it's on your schedule and it's much few hours and it's very, dedicated time towards that outcome. So in 2020, I started seeing, okay, now actually all these things I'm doing on the side are really adding up to a significant income. And then I was, blessed to have a wife who works and I can get health insurance through her. So that helps. So then in 2020, I was like, wow, all these things are happening. Why am I wasting my time with a W-2 job that's in the end is not going to make as much money as I could if I fully applied myself to, the real estate investing, world. So I can say, if you just want to do, if you just want to buy properties, invest and not do any of the other outside things, it's going to take a while, right? Because, if you can make 10% on your money, if you want to make 100 grand, you have to have $1 million invested, but it's going to take a while to invest. But if you do all these other things that generate income from various streams, I think you can add it up. So I love what Lisa did, started her side business. So if there's some other way you can find to make money, maybe you can accelerate this process. Or maybe you're happy with your W-2 job and you use that as your as kind of your trust fund to fund some of these other things as you move forward, right? So, so once I saw that all these other streams of income are doing really well, it's like, I don't need to continue to work. And when I made the decision and then started this transition, I just suddenly like, man, I don't have time to work anymore because my mind had freed up and my kind of, law of attraction, whatever, all these new opportunities started to come my way. And I couldn't wait for it to be over. Right. And now I'm plenty busy, but now it's for income and for things that I really enjoy doing. And, this is going to be, I think it's going to be a great year. Right. So I don't know if that was specific enough to kind of how to get there.
No, that is great. And I'm thinking about that. I've been busier. I didn't leave my W-2 off of my passive investments, but we have a very similar lifestyle where, just niche down, and we've always lived kind of simply, and allowing me to leave my job early to focus on real estate. And you're right, Jens, I totally get that. The opportunities that come your way, for me, it's a lot of filtering out what opportunity is the right opportunity. And so there might be some credence in that you have that time working under a W-2 where you really refined what it is that you're looking for and had the clarity on that beforehand. And I'm learning that clarity while I have the freedom, which kind of sometimes feels like a rub, like, golly, I don't want to waste my time on the wrong opportunities. So let's talk about those passive investments, because a lot of people have gotten their start off of, and Jens, both of you spoke to this, but Jens, you're talking about all of the, you didn't realize how much you had acquired and accumulated in the investments that you had, put money in. And those were your own personal investments. And Lisa, you spoke to that a little bit about, I started investing passively. How would you say those passive investments really fed into snowballing, into the snowball?
Yeah, go ahead, Jens. You can go first.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I think maybe I wasn't, so I did my active investing, smaller properties, either myself with some joint ventures and so forth. But then also on the passive side, I did some stuff through my self-directed IRAs and stuff, which I can't access. That was more longer term. But I did do a few kind of investments in my own account, if you will, passive. But then also, when you do a syndication, suddenly, you have an ownership in a deal and you just start getting that residual income every month. And it's like, wait a minute, here's another check that showed up. That's pretty nice. One may not make a huge difference, but if you have 5 of those show up, then suddenly it starts to add up, right? So it's just those small, and I think as investors, especially in real estate, there's not a big bang. And for early on, I was like, okay, what is this one deal I can do that's gonna get me over the finish line, right? And I realized that's not the case. It is a combination of small deals and small streams of income, a few $100s here, a few $100s there. And before you know it, that's gonna add up to, meet or exceed your current income or your needs. And then with all the tax benefits and everything, you don't need to make quite as much to have the same bottom line, right? So So that's kind of how it was. I mean, I do still invest passively, but a lot of those are in my retirement accounts and so forth. Or I put money into my own deals, as an LP as well. So getting kind of both sides of those investments as well.
That's such a cool part of the syndication model. I can be on both sides. I can be on the active GP side or on the LP side in the same deal. Lisa, how did passive investing, help you?
Yeah, so for me, like I did a combination of having some deals that were in my solo 401k that I set up, and then some were direct investments. So I would say I did four. So 50% are from my retirement savings, and then 50% I did on my own. And then my plan, like I hadn't fully planned to leave my job this year. So like I was going to do and I still might. I was going to do like two more this year. So that would have brought the total up to like four or five, like maybe six in total. But two of the deals, I decided to leave, number one. So I decided to use that money instead of investing in another deal, use it to help me essentially bootstrap to start my own business, like to really focus on building the business that I've already started.
You invested in you.
I decided to invest in myself. That's right. And then two of the deals that I invested in both sold. Like unbeknownst, like this was like one was before I even made, both of them were before I made the decision to leave. So that money, and that's not IRA money, like that's my own money. So those deals, the amounts of the money is coming back with friends. So my plan is to redeploy that back out to more deals because it wasn't money that I was planning on living on. So yeah, for me, I love it. I think it's just another additional income that comes in to supplement that. I just know that at least there's a little bit of money coming in, which is great. But just for me, like when I made the decision to leave, it was like, okay, the question that we were talking about before, I think one thing I would add to that, which is also applies here, is the passive investments. I believe in a way it sort of created this opportunity because the reality is like sometimes you're in decision overload because like with my job, like I had so many decisions that I need to be making. And then in my business, I have a gazillion decisions I need to be making. And I didn't really have a lot of who's that I could push down a lot of the work that I was doing at my job. Some of it, the ones that I had left, I still needed to do. So as a result, like when you are faced with so many decisions, what I find ends up happening is some of them just don't get done. And then when you get this time to really take back your time to like really focus on the things that you want to do, I find that you're just you're in a better place to make decisions that are just more clear and more in alignment with what it is that you want to do. And I think that's what my focus is entrepreneurs and business owners, because I can see the power of how passive investing isn't going to add to your bucket of decisions when you have done the work up front to make those relationships with those good operators and the markets and et cetera, et cetera. Once you make that investment, it's not like as though you need to be reserved, cash reserves and like talking to property manager and making more decisions about the property. No, like that's done. So that way you can then focus on building your business, like be it acquiring more properties or whatever business you might be in.
I love that. And Lisa, I love what you said about decision fatigue almost, right? You're just almost burned out through your day job, and then there's all the stuff afterwards, which I think is the huge challenge for a lot of people is, if you have a demanding W-2 job, how do you find the time to do that side gig and the motivation and the ongoing kind of clarity of where to go? And so I can definitely see that's a huge challenge. And I'm sure that now you're like, now I can actually focus on what's important and have the mental clarity to make the right decisions.
Yeah, as I said, I started this job in the fall of 2016, and I remember there was a girl that was working there before that I knew before, and she left about a month or so after I joined. And she said to me, she was like, it'll take 6 months for you to figure out what you're doing and 6 months to determine whether you like it or not. And in those second 6 months is when I realized, you know what? I can do this, but this is not the end for me. So I need to start thinking about how I'm going to make the transition out of here, because this is not going to be my forever place. And I think I remembered meeting people like who would be like leaving the company to go work for another company. And I would say to them, like, this is not like what you're doing isn't really a solution if, they were real estate investors and entrepreneur minded people. And I said, like, if you are real estate investors slash entrepreneur minded, like skipping from job to job to job to job isn't the solution. The solution is like figuring out how to build a business and like how to invest in a release in real estate that is sustainable for your lifestyle. Um, and maybe that means hunkering down at a job longer so that way you can build a runway to try to give yourself a chance to make it happen. At least during this time, I'll know whether, I can do this or not, and whether it's something that I can do or whether I probably need to take another job. But like, you're not going to know until you actually take the time to do it. And that's the beauty of getting clear. And then number two, setting up the runway to actually make it happen.
Love that.
There's so much power in what you said. I interviewed a gentleman last week, it's Tyler. He's amazing. Just so amazing. And he referenced the book, The Alchemist. And it's a fable. We put it on as an audiobook, or reading it or listening to it as a family. And it speaks to that. Is like, well, the main character, the boy, says, well, I know he's in pursuit of his dream. And that's the whole concept of the fable, is pursuing your dreams. And this boy, he's a boy, he's obviously not a young child, and he's pursuing his dream. And he realized, well, I was a shepherd, and I could always go back to being a shepherd. I know how to do that. I haven't forgotten how to do that. But what if I just take this step? What if I just go, and I've already learned these other things along my journey. I know a lot of things I didn't know. What more will I know? What will I find out? Like, that runway is super important, and being able to say, well, if this is worst case, I kind of always go worst case scenario. If this doesn't work out, I can always go back to being a classroom teacher. Worst case scenario, you can go back into the IT world. You can go back to being a CPA. Worst case scenario, right. Like, okay, but I always think, what's the worst case scenario if I don't go all in on myself? If I don't invest in myself, how am I going to feel about myself?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's what I had to tell my boss when I was leaving. I said to him when I gave the notice, he was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, I need to get this out of my system now. Like, I feel that this is what I need to do. I need to go chase it. And like, if it doesn't work, then, I'll figure out what I'm going to do next. But like, staying with you, I just don't think that's the right answer.
Yeah. And I love that too, around what you said, people going from one job to the next because maybe they get a pay raise and something new to do. And in reality, you're just distracting yourself for, another year to learn this new job and this new company. And you somehow dull your desire to move on. And I definitely know I did that for a while by, I would distract myself either my bicycle riding or with my finding a new job. It's like, oh, this is good. And now I'm like somewhat stimulated and motivated here. But in reality, I wasn't really following my dreams. And I had a client I just worked with, and he's like, oh man, I could go to this new company and it'll be more money and everything. I was like, well, you certainly can. How is that going to impact your, he wanted out in a year. How is that going to impact your ability to leave in a year? Are you going to have the bandwidth to work on your business while you're learning a new job? And the conclusion he came to is like, no, I can't do it both. So it's like, well, it's up to you, right? You can make more money, but maybe your ultimate dream will have to be put on hold for another year or two. So it's kind of those decisions we make at all times, right? And we're so conditioned to work towards short-term rewards, like, oh, the paycheck is going to be better tomorrow than it was last week. Well, that's wonderful. But when you look back, as Julie said, in 10 or 20 years, like, man, I traded a slightly bigger paycheck now for my dreams that I never had the opportunity to pursue. So I think that's a key thing to be aware of.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that, when you bring up distraction, for me, I didn't realize how distracted I was until COVID came. Because when COVID came and I could no longer do all these external activities, and I had to sit with myself, and be with, like, work was now in my house. It was like, wow, like this is intense, and it just really reframed a lot for me, in terms of like the sacredcy of time, and the fact that you're not getting this time back, and like things could change on a dime, and like sort of saying, okay, you know what, like if you really want to do something in your life, like taking the step out to do it, like really being brave enough and courageous enough to take that next step. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that. I always think that if we're in a similar position, it always takes at least a year, minimum of 6 months, to learn a new position. So if there is that bouncing around, it's like, it's not just like maybe you get the pay increase, but you guys have said it, and I'm just kind of really hammering it home, is that you lose that bandwidth because you're learning, and your brain is literally forming new dendrites. It's your brain is forming the pathways for you to actually, work efficiently at that new position. So sometimes it is better to just say, I'm not going to level up in that way. I'm going to use this as my holding spot over here, and then I'm going to level up and build my businesses out this direction. Jens, at the beginning, I love that you said, it's not just this poof, instant, like, oh, I invested in this and poof, I can now, leave my W-2. But you recognize, and this is most of life, is the daily discipline, or the regular discipline of going about things. And let's go ahead, and we're going to need to wrap up and everything, I know, here in a moment. But if we can speak to what I'm going to call the average person. So like, right, I come from the teaching community where they would say, I don't have enough money to invest. I'm a teacher. I know we have all heard this, right? So maybe if we can speak to some of those people that might say, well, how am I ever going to do this? I don't make that much money. I can't invest passive. We all know excuses. So let's just encourage those people in some capacity.
Yeah, yes. Yes, it does take some capital, right? But if this is not, you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to get started, right? A lot of people have started very small with a single family house, in their neighborhood, perhaps that is run down. They buy it, they fix it up, and they sell it. And suddenly they have some capital there, right? Oh, now I have some more money, right? And if you're willing to maybe do that for a few years and build up that pool of money that you could invest, or you look at, and this is the other thing, like we all told, put all your money into your 401k or your retirement. Well, then you can access when you're 60 or 70 years old. Well, that's not going to help you right now. So maybe you look at, should I put less money aside in my 401k and save some of that right now for cash flow next year instead of in 20 years from now, whatever that may be, right? So look at that. And also, financial advice out there is quite often by somebody who has a certain interest in a certain outcome, right? So everybody wants you to put money into the stock market because that's what, we're all being told and brainwashed to kind of do, right? But there are other ways. So really just sit down and look at what your finances are, and see what are unique. Maybe you do take a side job and you drive Uber or something else, right? And you, over a year, you save another, $20,000-$30,000, whatever it is, and you put that in. Just figure it out. If it's important enough, if it's strong enough, you'll find a way to do it, right?
100% truth right there. Lisa,
Yeah.
what do you say?
I would say, probably connected to the high performance coaching that Jens does, is like, I would say that sometimes people have the ability to earn more. they could monetize their skills in other ways. It's just that they're probably not aware or like not confident with themselves about the value they could bring to the marketplace to other people about things that they already know. And that's where like getting with perhaps even a coach can help them to sort of see those blind spots in themselves. And while you're working full time, like a job, I would recommend probably in making that investment in yourself. A lot of people don't make that and aren't making investments in themselves because they don't feel that they need someone else to help them in this journey. But I've read the book Who Not How, and it talks about Michael Jordan, which is one of the most well-respected basketball players, and how much coaches he had, even though he came with so much talent. And, if he had so much talent and yet so much coaches, much more like, you might not see yourself as being a talented basketball player, but you have talents in other ways. And I think like a large part of what has enabled me to get to where I'm at now is my willingness to invest in myself constantly, even when it was hard and it was scary, and like being able to continue to show up because it's those investments that help you to get on the court of your life and like to be able to say, you know what, I actually could do something differently. Maybe I start a little small business in addition to teaching, or maybe I do something else in addition to whatever job you're doing. Maybe it means that you watch less TV. These are some of the things that like where, or less social media. There's a lot of time available to people that is not being used for, that could be used in other ways that could help them to earn and then ultimately invest to achieve their freedom.
I love it.
That's my 2 cents on that.
I love it. And there's so much time that people spend. I know most people know I don't watch much TV because I'm like, there's so many amazing things I can be doing with my time. And I actually have to condition myself to sit there and like with my daughter loves to just chill out and snuggle, and that's her snuggle place. So it's like I have to like anchor myself down, like I can do this. But I've also conditioned myself to be that way because I'm like, oh, I want to use my time, what I call my heartbeats, to do good things and things that are moving the needle forward. So always finding the way to do that. I think sometimes people don't dare to dream, and that concept of just being afraid to realize your dreams. And I want to encourage everyone listening that you can have your dream. And sometimes we feel, maybe we've had experiences in our life that make us feel that we will never achieve our dream, or if we achieve our dream and we reach it, that it's not going to be as great as we thought, or well, now I have to come up with a new dream or something. Like, don't be afraid to go after your dream. Go for it. You can absolutely have it. Well, are there any so good and so practical? Are there any other gems that you would like to leave behind for everybody listening?
So the one thing that I've been becoming very aware of here in the last 5 weeks or something is that once you don't have a W-2 job, your time becomes extremely valuable. Because imagine you sit at the office from 8 to 5, like I'm just here, maybe I'll be productive, maybe I won't, maybe I'll, mess
Play
around
solitaire.
Yeah, whatever it may be. Now I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not going to waste my time because if I don't do something productive now, that's going to pay off. This is going to impact myself. So I'm like, okay. And it's interesting, right? I'm so much more protective of my time and everything else. It's such a different, something I didn't realize was going to happen, but it has. It's like, wow, I wasted a lot of time at work in the past that it could have been much more productive.
I can echo and resonate with that. The moment I buckled down and had like that realization of this is what I want in my life, and creating that path, that runway for myself, it was becoming very guarded about my time. And unfortunately, it's bittersweet. I actually started hosting fewer events and started going to fewer get-togethers, because I started just niching down on how am I using my time and making sure that the people in the center of my world had my time, that wasn't compromised, but that, well, for this short period of time, it just means that I'm not going to be available to the whole world in the same capacity. I might not go to every get together, and there were some short-term sacrifices that I knew I had to make to, have a podcast, launch a podcast while I was still teaching, and to do things. It meant I don't have the bandwidth for everything, but it's also not forever.
Yes, I would agree with that. Julie, that's such a great point. And that's what I would also leave with people as well is, just getting really clear about what it is that you want to create in your life. And then be willing to take the steps to make it happen. And sometimes it means saying no to certain things, but by saying no, you then create an opportunity to say yes to a lot of other things, and like sort of having faith that the things that you really want to say yes to are going to come. You just need to keep going along the path of doing the things you need to do to show up for that. So yeah.
I love it. What is the best way? People are connecting with you and they're thinking, wow, these are extraordinary people. I already know that. Yours are so amazing, so inspirational, and just such wonderful people. What's the best way for them to connect with you? Maybe they want to see what you are offering as a passive investment, or they want to connect with you in other capacities to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. So people can go to my website, Open Doors with an S, opendoorscapital.com. And if you put it opendoorscapital.com/call, get on a free call with me. I offer, 20-minute free calls for anybody that if you're either interested in investing or coaching. And my email is jens@opendoorscapital.com. So that's what I wanted to share.
I need to give a plug, because Jens is a certified high performance coach, and it will revolutionize your life. If you are looking for a way to invest in yourself, maybe you're lacking confidence, maybe you're lacking clarity, maybe you need to raise necessity. I'm like going through some of the traits, right? I know that the high performance model has really impacted my life. It's impacted Jens, and I love that you are helping impact other lives through that. So if you're somehow feeling like, I want to do all this, but I really don't know how, I know it's in me, but I need to access that, like, schedule a call immediately with Jens so that you can get involved with high performance coaching.
Thank you.
Lisa,
Awesome.
how do we reach you?
Yeah, so to reach me, pretty much you just go to my website, which is lisahylton.com. And that's Hylton like the hotel, but only thing with a Y instead of an I. And yeah, all of my offerings in terms of getting in touch with me is all on my website when you visit. Everything from my podcasts, blogs, and then YouTube channel, the whole 9 yards is pretty much all on my website. So yeah, definitely would love to hear from you. So looking forward to it.
If you're looking to reinvent yourself and maybe you're not seeing the potential that you have, you're like, I need to come up with another job, like, start listening to the Level Up REI podcast, because Lisa has an amazing podcast, and you're just amazing. And I enjoy how you go about things on your podcast and in life. So if go check out her podcast and schedule a call, see what she has going on, schedule a call to connect up with her as well. You definitely won't regret any of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie.
Jens, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing more time with my audience and just giving some, creating a runway. That's what we're just going to call this, the runway to leaving their W-2.
That's right.
Love it. Thank you.
So all my awesome listeners, you have what it takes to do this. Although Lisa and Jens are extraordinary and wonderful people, guess what? You are too. And you have the capacity within yourself to make these same choices and to have the outcome, the life of your dreams. So don't be afraid to do it. Step out into it and go find your freedom. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. This episode was brought to you by 3 Keys Investments. They are dedicated to helping people like you, you, my awesome listeners, develop passive income and legacy wealth through multifamily investing. Feel free to check out their website, 3keysinvestments.com, to see if there is an offering that will help your portfolio grow and meet all of your needs. If you haven't already rated, reviewed, subscribed, liked, all of those bells and whistles, I would be absolutely honored if you would do that for Ask Me How I Know. Thanks again, and go make it a great day.